Hey guys, what's going on? It's Adam the Science Tutor, and today we're going to be going over the cerebrospinal fluid, CSF for short, and it's the fluid in our brain and in our spine. So it helps bring nutrients and water to our brain and spine, helps remove waste via the internal jugular vein, and it's the CNS is made by choroid plexus, which is found in each of our ventricles that we'll be talking about. So first, let's start off with the flow chart. The flow chart is very important as it'll allow us to see and kind of better visualize what's going on in the flow of our CSF. So we start off with our lateral ventricles, which once again have choroid plexuses that make our cerebrospinal fluid, and it's going to go out into our third ventricle via the foramen of Monro. So all the foramen are going to be named after scientists that discovered it. So foramen of Monro is the first one, and that's allowing the cerebrospinal fluid from our lateral ventricle conjoined now into our third ventricle. And I drew two lateral ventricles because they're lateral, they have one on each side of the brain. So that dumps into our third ventricle, which is at the center. And our third ventricle will now go our cerebrospinal fluid coming out of our third ventricle will go out through the aqueduct of Sylvius. And once again, each ventricle has its own choroid plexus. Therefore, each ventricle is making more CSF. So now we have our fourth ventricle, which is the ventricle of options, because we can go to the spine, we could get it going out of our system, and we could get it going around our brain. So we have our options. So we have our central canal, which is going out to our spinal cord, or supplies cerebrospinal fluid to our spine. We have the foramen of Luschka, and we also have the foramen of Magnede. So you have two different pathways you can go. And the fourth ventricle is cool because it has all of our different options of where this cerebrospinal fluid is going. So you have a foramen of Magnede. And the foramen of Luschka and the foramen of Magnede are both going to go to the same place. I'm going to draw this in green right quick. But the foramen of Magnede and the foramen of Luschka are both going to go to our subarachnoid space, which is our second layer, which is very important to note, and you'll go see it once we draw out the brain diagram. After we finish our chart, you will see the second layer and the importance of it. So subarachnoid space, which is our second layer. I'm going to reiterate that a million times. So subarachnoid space is our second layer, and then we have arachnoid granulations, which is going to connect the second layer to the first layer, or allow the cerebral fluid to flow. We're going to have two different pathways the arachnoid granulations can go. So you're going to have the superior sagittal sinus, which is our primary or our first layer. And you're going to see this once again once I draw out the brain diagram. You have your superior sagittal sinus, and then you have your inferior sagittal sinus as well. And these are two different pathways in which our CSF can go. And we don't have any more ventricles, therefore no more CSF is being made past the fourth ventricle. So the superior sagittal sinus goes out to the right transverse sinus, and then to our sigmoid sinus, and then out finally through our internal jugular vein, which is going to pump our blood. And it's like a venous return system. It's going to pump our blood and our waste out, and it's going to go out to the heart, in which the heart is going to dispose of the waste and reoxygenate the blood. So our inferior sagittal sinus will go to our straight sinus, and then to our left transverse sinus. So if you guys have already noticed, we added an additional step for inferior sagittal sinus. So that means there's an additional step. That's just a key little difference, and they're both going to enter out through the sigmoid sinus, because then the sigmoid sinus is going to connect to our internal jugular vein. I like drawing it out like that. However, you can erase it and draw the left transverse sinus going out to the sigmoid sinus as well. It would mean the same thing. But now we're pretty much done with our chart. But the chart is extremely important to know, because once you know that, you can draw out a heart diagram. And like I'm going to show you guys in just a sec, you can then fill in the blanks. So there's an extra step with the inferior sagittal sinus. Cool. So some key ones to know: superior sagittal sinus is our primary, so think of that as delivering our CSF to our brain. And then we have our subarachnoid space, which is going to be our second second layer, which is going to pump from there to our superior sagittal sinus. So those are two very important ones. Ventricles are important to note that choroid plexuses make our CSF. So choroid plexuses make our CSF. Just drew a brain, but I don't like drawing the brain white, so I'm going to draw it pink. I'm going to erase this. So important takeaways thus far. Ventricles have choroid plexuses, which make our CSF. We have 3 ventricles, and we have different foramen that allow the CSF to flow from one part of the brain to the another. So if I drew that first marker out, what did we start with on our flow chart? Our lateral ventricle, because that is our first ventricle. That is where our initial CSF is made. So on our lateral ventricle, and we have 1 and 1 on each side of our brain. And right now I'm just drawing out our 2 spaces. I know you guys remember I said that one of them is our outer layer, or our primary layer, and the other one's our secondary layer. If you guys remember which one's the first layer, the first layer is our superior sagittal sinus, and the second layer that I'm drawing right now is going to be our subarachnoid space. So very important, but we'll get back to that in a bit. So once you have your flow chart memorized, we know that the lateral ventricle is going to create our cerebrospinal fluid via the choroid plexuses, and it's going to go out through our foramen of Monro. Remember, all these foramen are named after people, so Monro goes first. Our CSF is going to be indicated by this blue, and then we're going to draw our next ventricle, and then it dumps into our third ventricle, and the third ventricle has our aqueduct of Sylvius, which will then pump the CSF from there to our fourth ventricle, our ventricle of options. And keep in mind, each ventricle has its own choroid plexus, which creates CSF. So not all the CSF is coming from our lateral ventricle, but that is just where it starts. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to go there. We have our fourth ventricle, our ventricle of options, because we can have it going through the foramen of Luschkins, we have it going through the foramen of Magneid, or the central canal to our spine. So foramen of Luschka and the foramen of Magneid are both going to pump into our second layer, and our second layer, once again, is our subarachnoid space. So there's our cerebral fluid moving, cerebrospinal fluid moving in and out. So I made a mistake on that first arrow because aqueduct of Sylvius just pumps it from the third ventricle to the fourth ventricle. The fourth ventricle is the ventricle of change or of difference as options, because you have options of where the cerebral fluid will go other than to a next ventricle. It is the last ventricle to receive and to make our cerebral spinal fluid. So from the foramen of Luschka, we go out to our subarachnoid space. And so in pink here is our primary layer, which was our superior sagittal sinus. If you guys remember, or if you need to, check your chart. If you know how to make a chart, you can always go and backtrack and see where you're at, which is why I think the chart is extremely helpful, at least for me, because you could then draw a brain diagram and walk yourself through each of these steps as long as you draw 3 ventricles. So you have your superior sagittal sinus, and this is going to supply all our CNS for our entire our brain. So, and CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. And then this green layer, which is our second layer, and I know I've repeated it, is our subarachnoid space. So subarachnoid space. So the second layer is the subarachnoid space, and the superior sagittal sinus is our first space, or our primary. It's the outer space. And what connects these two? Well, we could look back at the chart, or we could remember that the arachnoid granulations are what connects these two. So the cerebral spinal fluid is going to go through these arachnoid granulations from our subarachnoid space into our superior sagittal sinus. So very cool. And once again, we can check our chart. Our chart will back us up and we see now that the cerebrospinal fluid is flowing through our brain, supplying our brain with both nutrients and water. Super important. Cranial nervous system, I don't know why I keep saying that. Cerebrospinal fluid is then being made from each of our ventricles, and all the excess, the ones that once we're finished with it, all our waste will go out to our internal jugular vein, which will go out and away. And that'll get circulated back out through our venous system. So thank you guys for watching and tuning in. If you guys have any questions, email me or leave a comment below. This pretty much sums up the video. I think I put an extra little note in here. But yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Please let me know if you guys have any questions. So thanks.